welcome to Ocean Park, future home of New Millennium Wrestling. Today we're not here to talk about wrestling though. Today we're here to talk about the future Justice League movies, especially pertaining to the spoilers that were just leaked online today. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's some pretty serious doozies in there. We don't know if they're true or not, but with me I've got my cohort, DavidHawk actor. Say hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and I was going to introduce myself as Batman, but I guess we'll go with DHA today.
And over here to my left, we have our special guest today, Derrick Zane. Derrick Zane, say hello.
Yo.
There we go. That's the words of Derrick Zane. Guys, let's jump right into this, because we've all three been over privately with what you guys thought about these rumors. So let's kind of go over this one by one. The first rumor is that the villains are going to be Lex Luthor and Metallo. What are your guys' thoughts? David, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that's an obvious choice whenever you're talking about Superman. Obviously, Lex Luthor needs to be involved. Metallo's a great way to introduce Kryptonite, as well as give you somebody that Superman's going to be able to punch.
Derrick, your take.
I'd have to agree that works. If it's a Justice League movie specifically, though, there's a lot of people that could be factored in that they haven't mentioned. You're missing Grodd. You're missing a lot of the Batman, Rogues Gallery. What about Cheetah? Where are the people that are going to be not necessarily Superman villains, but other Leaguer villains?
Well, being that this is a Man of Steel, being that this is the Man of Steel sequel, it would make sense though for it to be a Superman villain, wouldn't you say, Derrick?
Oh, okay. So this is just Superman.
Yeah, this is the sequel for Man of Steel.
That works. Obviously, you're going to need Luthor. Metallo allows you a threat towards Superman or towards Kal-El.
Right.
It's hard to say. Remember, anything that is a rumor is ultimately suspect because there's no definitive proof one way or the other.
Right.
It's just speculation.
Absolutely. DHA, what were you going to say before I cut you off?
Well, I was just going to voice the exact same thing you did, that we need to remember that this isn't actually for the Justice League, not these spoilers that came out on Latino Review, potential spoilers. They're for Man of Steel 2, Batman vs. Superman, whatever they're going to call it. That's first, and, we'll see how this goes out.
And let me also jump in and say this, too. I probably should have said this at the beginning. These spoilers are just hearsay, okay? They were evidently leaked by someone who was fired from the set recently. You could take it with a grain of salt. I kind of tend to see a lot of these spoilers making sense in the sense that this is Zack Snyder we're talking about, and he's shown us already with the first Man of Steel that he's going off the grid a little bit. I was never a fan of the Watchmen comics. Did you guys get into the Watchmen at all?
Well, you got to remember, the Watchmen was not a series. The Watchmen was a one-time shot book written by Moore to kind of shake the industry on its head.
But
the movie,
okay,
very much not the same as the book. However, the movie was well done, but I can understand where some people may not necessarily find a direct linkage.
So once again, that was a situation where Snyder went off the grid. He didn't necessarily follow the...
Right, I think Snyder was working with... Yeah, okay, look. Ultimately, it's never going to be what you as the comic book fan want, because it's ultimately has to turn a profit. No movie mouse is going to put out a film just for the comic book fans, because there aren't enough to make it profitable.
Correct.
So you have to be able to try and draw in outside parties. If you just do it solely based on the comic book material, you run the risk of alienating that market base that doesn't necessarily understand the nuances. So yes, he went off the page. Did he go massively off page? That's in the eye of the beholder.
Correct. DHA, what was your thought?
I personally think, yeah, as much as you can look at that 12-issue miniseries of The Watchmen and say, did he go panel for panel? Obviously not. You only got 2 hours in this movie, or 2.5, I think he took. You got to get all that story in there. But there were some shots that they did that were like straight out of the panel. I did like that they changed the ending. I thought, from the comic, when I got to issue 12, I was like, this really doesn't make any sense. So I liked the creative differences that they did do. But I thought when Watchmen was first being talked about, they were like, yeah, we're going to set it in 2010, and I was just like, this is going to be crap.
Right.
And then Zack Snyder was the guy to go, no, we got to put it right back in 1980, I think it was 87, 88. We got to put it back in there. We got to do it, the way it's supposed to be done. We got to treat it with respect. And I think that's what he brought to Man of Steel, too.
Okay. Well, so we can all three agree that Zack Snyder is not afraid to take chances with the story and risk losing, diehard comic fans. And rightfully so, because like Derek said, you're not going to please everybody. And we're going to get into that over the course of this hour. But I think we all agree on that. So let me take us into the second leaked supposed spoiler. This one is kind of strange. And Derek, we're going to go to you first on this one. The second leaked spoiler is that Batman forms a UN-type deal to stop Superman from destroying another city. Now, I know you had an opinion on that earlier. Now's the time to share it. What do you think?
Okay, this is my thought. And when you're dealing with the Batman in this new series of movies, you have a golden opportunity to do something that has rarely been done, and I'm very pleased in how they kind of did this in the New 52. If you don't know what the New 52 is, the New 52 is the reboot of the DC comic universe. The way they structured the Batman in the New 52 is that Batman is kind of an urban myth. He's known in Gotham, but only really in Gotham. Outside of Gotham, everybody kind of assumes it's just some kind of marketing ploy by the city to drum up tourism. Like, oh, we got this spooky, mysterious vigilante type person. The PD's after him, but not really. And Gordon's kind of in on it, and they run the bat signals basically to drum up tourism money. In fact, when the first episodes of the New 52 Justice League, the first time the Green Lantern and Flash meet Batman, their exact words are, "Oh crap, you're real?"
Right.
Because that's the joke.
Yeah.
In my head, the way it should work, and this is honestly how I think the story could work perfectly, there's no reason for the government to really try to fight Superman because they know they can't. So instead, if you can't beat him, make him join you, and that fits entirely for the Kal-El mythos, that he is well-raised, he is a good Kansas boy, that he would want to fight for truth, justice, and the American way. It makes sense then that the government sends him after this dangerous vigilante in Gotham, and that's where you get the potential fight between Superman and Batman. Is there a reason for Batman to create a United Nations super team? No. But that could come later if they decide to do a Justice League International. Again, New 52.
Right.
I think it's way too soon for them to start touching on that just yet. It doesn't make any sense for them to do that.
That's an interesting point, because it may seem like they're kind of getting ahead of themselves with this sequel. DHA, what is your thoughts on that?
Well, let's get back to the spoiler for a second.
Well,
this
yeah.
Batman forms a UN-type deal with the government. That's just so out of character for Batman. It doesn't even belong in there. Batman is not going to work with the government because he thinks they're full of crooks and corruption and just incompetence, really. Now, Batman seeing Superman as a legitimate threat, that I absolutely believe. I believe he would plan for a contingency. He'd try to gauge his weaknesses and whatnot. So I can completely see that happening. I just don't see him working with the government for that.
Mhm.
Derek, you're
And let's not forget the central ethos of the Batman character. Batman ultimately is Ahab. If you really break it down to brass tacks, he is obsessed and crime is the white whale. He doesn't have time for outside influences until they come into his patch, which is Gotham.
makes a lot of
Absolutely.
sense.
I mean, Batman is constantly 7, 10, 15 moves ahead. So he is always planning for every contingency. That's why he always has exactly what he needs in that belt of his, because he knows what's going to happen. He knows that this could be a result of this, so this could happen, this could happen.
Excellent.
So absolutely, I think he's gonna try to gauge Superman. He wants to know what can stop this Kryptonian.
Okay, the next I don't want to cut you guys off, but we still got like 9 more to go. The next one is this one's kind of interesting because DHA kind of mentioned this earlier today. Aquaman is in it, but not called Aquaman. He's there because the world engine in the ocean did something to the fish. I guess brought harm to the life in the ocean, and I guess I'm gonna assume blaming Superman. DHA, your thoughts on that?
Well, once again, the world engine basically condensed everything that was in its path. So yeah, it's gonna affect the ocean. That's down where Superman was in the southern hemisphere. So I could see that happening. I don't like the idea that they're not gonna reference him as Aquaman. Maybe they're not gonna give him a code name. Maybe that's what it really is. But having him in it, his motivation makes absolute sense.
Okay, Derek, your response.
If it's going to be Aquaman, they don't necessarily have to call him Aquaman to make it work. They could just call him Arthur, King of Atlantis. Do they want to get into that, though, this soon? I mean, that's a whole other bag of worms. You know, you got to then talk about why there is an Atlantis, why has Atlantis not involved itself in the surface matters before, yada, 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 yada. How much time do you want to put into it? I could see it maybe being something at the very end of the movie, maybe a tie-in for the next film, where the Atlanteans come up out of the water and he announces himself as Arthur, King of Atlantis, has come to wage war on the surface for its, for its crimes against, the ocean world, whatever it may be. We'll have to wait and see. That could just be speculation. Maybe it actually is something.
You bring up some really good points. My theory is what I was trying to bring up earlier, which is by doing the Justice League, because if you're going to do the Justice League right, you've got to involve certain characters. First, you have to involve the Holy Trinity, which is Superman, the Batman, and Wonder Woman. Then you probably have to bring in Green Lantern, the Flash, and Aquaman. Are they really taking the chance of trying to force feed too much in such a small period of time? Derek, I'll let you answer that first.
If they do it the way it was originally described, it can be done. The problem is you have to determine how many movies you want to make. Now, the idea was that Man of Steel was going to set up for the second film, which would be Batman. This one is apparently supposed to set up Wonder Woman, but it may also set up a couple of other people. Now, the idea was that with each film that was subsequently sprouted off, we would then start to get a new story arc of Batman and then establish new characters within the Batman story, and then another, maybe a Wonder Woman movie, which would establish some more characters. So eventually, when you got down the road, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, you could do a unified Justice League movie with all these characters already in place, with their stories told. If we're just trying to cram people into this movie because of impatience, it seems like we're hot-shotting it, and it's going to lose a lot of its effect because we're not going to have time to process everything. It's a lot of story to try and get into a small amount of time.
Well, let's also preface this that the next movie this is going to be the sequel to The Man of Steel, and evidently the rumor plan was that would then lead into the Justice League movies. So we don't know. I mean, there is speculation that they want to do Wonder Woman movies, and who knows? They'll probably want to cash in as much as they can. DHA, let me ask you: do you think that they're going way too fast and trying to shove way too much into this project at once?
No. I mean, when you look at it, Aquaman's going to be in it. But what's he going to be in it for? Is it going to be just a news report? Hey, we've got some King of Atlantis complaining about the oceans. I think what this is going to do is it's going to open up doors for solo movies. It's going to be like, hey, we've got this King of Atlantis. What's he all about? Now you've got interest in an Aquaman movie. It's going to bring in Wonder Woman looking for something, great. Now you got a Wonder Woman movie.
Well, here
I think it's going to branch out like that.
Let me cut you off right there because I want to use that as a segue into the next possible spoiler. We all know that Wonder Woman is going to play a significant role in this next movie. How significant, we're not sure yet. Rumor has it that, and again, another rumor, that the film has been delayed 10 months because they're not sure if they want to finance an island, island of, what is that, Themyscira? Did I say it right?
Themyscira.
Okay. They're not sure if they want to finance, creating the Paradise Island of Themyscira or not. That tells me if that's true, then Diana Prince has a pretty large part in this. So the next rumor is that Wonder Woman poses as a Wayne Enterprise investor, there to retrieve an item that belongs to her people. DHA, your thoughts on that?
I think that's an interesting way to bring in the character, and obviously if Wayne Enterprises has found something like maybe her bracelets, her crown, maybe the golden lasso itself, that gives her a reason to be around, to be there, to try to find it. Maybe it's at the Wayne Enterprises in Metropolis, who knows. But
that is interesting.
Bringing her in just as a Wayne investor, I mean, I hope that all ties into that motivation, and maybe she's just undercover, but I mean, if on the island there's gold and stuff, I mean, I guess she could easily figure out how to create an identity.
It's good to see she has a motivation and an agenda. So, DHA, Derrick Zane, your thoughts?
Diana is tricky. Okay, since you referenced the Holy Trinity, we need to explain for those who don't understand what the Trinity is. When you're looking at Superman, you're looking at the concept of science fiction in comic book form. He is the man of tomorrow. He's the man of science. The Batman is the Dark Knight Detective Comics, DC. Wonder Woman is high mythology magic. How then do you explain magic in this world that is pretty much supposed to be the world we're living in now? Hers is probably the most difficult one to work into this mix. How has Themyscira been, hidden all this time? How do you explain all this in? A way it could work. Now, again, I don't really know. This is just the amateur writer in me, speculating how it could work. But what if it is a Greek woman who is an investor in the Wayne Enterprises? We know that they've always been involved in, various projects. Archaeological dig in Greece. Finds what is supposed to be the girdle of Hera, the crown of, I can't remember the whole spiel, but it's the bracelets, the crown, the rope, and the girdle.
Right.
Maybe they actually find these whole things. She goes there to try and get them because maybe it belonged on her family's plot. While she's trying to sneak in and take them, she puts them on. Bang, boom! Suddenly she becomes infused with the spirit of Diana. There you go. So your uncle, off we go. Now suddenly we have a Wonder Woman.
So you see this as a possibility to open up a somewhat origin for Diana Prince then?
Possibly, but we don't know. Like I said, there's nothing that's been established in the Man of Steel that gives you the impression that magic exists.
No, what I'm saying is like you said, it's the amateur writer in you. This is just an avenue that you could take. So I like that. I got to be honest with you.
And that's not. It's not a unfamiliar story. Hawkman has had that as his basis. Wonder Girl,
and they may
Cassandra
do
Sandmark,
that because
that was her
they haven't.
basis.
They may do that because they haven't even established if there's going to be a Hawkman, Hawkwoman in this.
No, I'm just saying that idea, it's out there. It is in comics. It does work. I don't think that would work particularly well for Wonder Woman, because if you take away the aspect that she is very much a person out of her element, then you're taking away a piece of who she is. She is this perfection, this person that has no concept of rules of man. In your situation, she's a modern day woman. She's an investor, whatever. Almost like a Lara Croft type trying to steal back her stuff. I just think that would take away from who Wonder Woman really is.
Your thoughts,
and it would.
Derek? Yeah.
But like I said, the problem is how do you establish this background for her if there's been no emphasis to do it beforehand? That's why I'm saying hers is the most tricky aspect of this whole story.
And keep one thing in mind too, though, that basically what we're trying to do is both find pros and cons to these rumors. And what Derek, I think, did is he found a way to make it work. Now, it may not work, but at the same time, he is right. It could work if that's the way they wanted to go and turn that into a Wonder Woman. Basically take the Man of Steel and create a Wonder Woman origin in the Man of Steel so she's ready to do the next film. DHA, your last thought.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to bring up was one of the things that I had heard kind of going around on the internet, and obviously, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
Absolutely.
Is that one thing that they're possibly looking at for the origin of Wonder Woman is to take those Kryptonian colonists. Obviously, they had to go somewhere. Maybe they were in Greece and just thought of as gods, and then boom, you've basically explained that the god system was actually just Kryptonians. They were just aliens. That way, she gets to keep her, the island of Themyscira. You get to keep that. You get to keep why she has powers. You get to keep all the other things, and yet you've changed her enough to where people aren't going to be going, oh, you brought up gods, stuff like that.
And you know what? I like the thought of that.
So kind of the Thor angle.
Right. And the beauty about that theory is that it explains a lot of, because like all comics, there are, Wonder Woman takes place in very different universes, depending on which comic you refer to when talking about Diana Prince / Wonder Woman. Her powers change from time to time. On most of the comics I've read, I've seen less of the invisible jet and more of her basically being the female equivalent to Superman. Her powers being that she has superhuman strength. She has the power of flight. Even though she's not physically, her body shape is not physically invincible, she's lightning quick, and if you try to shoot her like with a machine pistol or whatever, she's lightning quick with the wristband. So, I honestly, I can see the theory that David just brought up, making a lot of sense of that. One last thought on that, Derek. Do you have anything to say?
Well, my concern with that, and it does work, is that people are going to make the analogy to Thor, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it just seems like lazy writing. But it would work.
Right.
And it could work if there was enough time between when this colonist group went into the universe, found Earth in its ancient form, settled. That would explain, why Zeus couldn't keep it in his pants. Maybe there was interbreeding between ancient Greeks and Kryptonians to create demigods and whatnot. Like I said, hers is the most tricky one to fit in because it is based on that kind of high mythology magic mentality.
And
if it can be done, there's a number of ways it can be done, but there's no perfect solution.
Right. And on that, we're going to go, I think you both really touched on that sufficiently. Let's go on to the next one. Now, the next one's not really that big of a deal. I'll get both your guys' opinion on it, and we'll go on to the one after that, because the one after that's actually a little more tricky. The next rumor is that Lex Luthor is in the shadows a lot as a manipulator, but there's not much FaceTime with him and Superman. Derek, your thoughts on that?
It would work perfectly. He should be kind of behind-the-scenes manipulator. He's supposed to be the smartest human on the planet, even smarter than, say, Bruce. The difference is I would say Bruce has a tendency to think more strategically than Lex does. Lex, I think, has a tendency to kind of be more goal-driven and more sociable, but he doesn't necessarily plan for every contingency the way that, say, Bruce Wayne does.
Right.
However, if you go by the canon of the comic books, Lex Luthor is the pinnacle of human ability, of like mental ability, which is the whole sticking point between him and Clark or Kal-El. He was supposed to be the guy to lead the humanity into the future, and then suddenly here comes this alien, and then everybody just hitches their pony to that guy. You know, losing the drive of, you know, the man first kind of thing.
Well, let me interrupt you real quick and ask you this question, because you kind of brought something up right there that I wonder, because you're seeing a lot in the more modern day superhero movies, and I'm talking the Bryan Singer X-Men, Batman, the Batman trilogy through Christopher Nolan and such, and maybe not so much with the Batmans, but you see it with X-Men. Is Lex Luthor basically a good guy that who had every intentions on bringing good to the people, but this alien comes over and takes away the thunder, which that turns him into the bad guy? Is that what you see, or?
I don't know that he was ever necessarily good. I think he was good in the way that most mega corporate owners are, in that they have a byline and they want to make sure that they meet their investors' expectations.
Right.
I think maybe he wasn't running around kicking puppies, but I don't think he was necessarily a nice guy.
He's basically the mold of a shrewd businessman.
Yeah,
you know, like
he's ruthlessly brilliant.
Yeah, shrewd Fortune 500 business
I think
guy.
though, yeah, I think what you can ultimately argue is that Lex Luthor's biggest, you know, weakness is his ego.
Right.
He was the guy who was supposed to be the future of mankind, and suddenly here comes this fucking dude from somewhere else who stole his thunder. I think that's where the craw sticks.
Right.
But it would make sense for him to be the shadowy kind of
right.
puppet master in this whole storyline.
You'd be good with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. DHA, your thoughts?
I think Derek nailed it on the head.
I do
Lex
too.
is the guy controlling everything. However, when it comes down to it, the best villains are always the ones who think that they're in the right. And Derek's right that Lex believes that he is the best thing for humanity. In fact, it's been said quite a few times in the comics, Lex Luthor could cure cancer if he wanted to. It's just that doesn't appeal to him as a challenge. It's not challenging to him, and he doesn't see the benefit for Lex Luthor in doing that.
Right. I think I agree. So are you saying that you're good with that possible spoiler that he's just in the shadows, doesn't have much time with Clark Kent, and it's seen?
Absolutely. That's one of the things, like, as the people watching the movie, we should know. We should get to see everything. But if Superman figures it out and captures Lex at the end of this movie, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Right. Okay, let's move on.
If I could add on to that.
Sure.
Well, if I could add on to that. He's very much right about that. The biggest problem I always had with the Tim Burton Batman, the very first one, was that he killed Joker. You know, for those of you who are religious, the Bible doesn't go, in the beginning, God killed the devil at the end. You cannot have that, that conflict right at the beginning. Wait a while. Don't have a conflict immediately between Luthor and Kal-El. Tease it till eventually it does happen. And I can see where that could happen. It could happen in an actual Justice League movie. And there's a whole other bag of, of fun we can get into that. But yeah, you should always tease that.
Yeah, and I don't mind a confrontation at the end. I don't mind Superman being, I know what you did, Luthor, and Luthor just being like, prove it. You will never get me. Mm-hmm.
Well,
my hands are clean.
That would lead into one thing that it's the usual for a trio, which is the first movie, the good guys always win. Second movie, the good guys are left hanging, and everything's not so good. And then finally, the third movie, everything gets resolved. Typical Star Wars, such like that. Second movie is when you gotta encounter the misfortune and stuff. Like I said, I didn't want to get too much into that. I think we all agree with that. Now, this is a big one, guys. And I know you guys both have opinions on this. And I don't know where I stand on this, but let's just jump right in it. Robin betrays Batman at some point, leading to a falling out between them. DHA, let's start with you.
I'm okay with this. I mean, obviously, with the Ben Affleck Batman, what they want is they want a Batman who's been going out for about 10 years, which means probably about 6 of that has been with Robin. And in the comic books, they basically have Robin getting into the Teen Titans. He's also doing college, so he's not there when Batman needs him. That causes a rift between the two of them, and eventually Batman just fires him. He's like, well, then you're not Robin anymore. So I'm okay with that. I think that'll be an interesting way to play it off. I'm not sure how they're going to make the betrayal work out, but I'm definitely interested in a falling out between the two of them.
Well, it could be exactly like you just explained it. Derrick Zane, your response to that?
For a betrayal to have any kind of weight, there needs to be a history. And to try and establish a connection between the Batman and Robin at the very beginning of a movie and have it have some kind of weight to it makes no sense, because there's no past that we have seen between the two of them, other than some applied, past that we've never seen. So it doesn't carry enough weight to really matter.
Let me jump on that. What if they do kind of flashbacks, like varied flashbacks, kind of like they did with Watchmen during that credit scene when they were showing you clips of the years and stuff? What if they did that with Robin? You see him as a little kid, then you see him.
It could work, but I think it honestly loses a lot of thunder, and you end up having to spend a lot of time dealing with these flashbacks that you could be dealing with other shit.
And suddenly the movie
you could be establishing other characters with that time.
And also let's keep in mind, if they were to go that route, suddenly the movie is more about Batman than it is about the Man of Steel, which is, and keep in mind, this is a Man of Steel sequel. So how can you really get deep into the origin of where Batman is at that point? Derek, you go first.
If it's supposed to be a story of the Batman having functioned for a while, I still honestly think the best way it works is to kind of keep the Batman a mystery until you actually meet him. And even then, it should be kind of a mystery, as it should be focused on Cal being Clark, trying to learn about this guy in that way that a good reporter tries to. You dig up leads, you try to figure this guy out. That sort of thing. I don't know that you should necessarily delve that deeply into the Batman's past just yet. Mystery is good to encourage you to come back to see more.
I agree 100%. DHA, I want your response. And remember, this is a Man of Steel sequel. This isn't a Batman origin film. So your thoughts on, somehow bringing into the fact that Robin possibly betrays Batman and, having that leading to a fall. Because that evidently, for some reason, if that is true, that has to mean something at some point. There has to be that story. That betrayal has to have some effect on the story somehow. So, what's your thought on that?
Well, I'm not sure how that would play off into a Metallo Lex Luthor villainy, but I do want one thing that I thought would be really interesting was, rather than having any talk about Dick Grayson Robin, you do introduce Robin, but it be Jason Todd. Now, anybody who knows about Robin, and that's most people in the world, they've heard Batman and Robin, they only think of Dick Grayson. They don't even know that there's been multiple Robins. Right. But anyway, you bring in Jason Todd, maybe have Batman talk about it with Jason for a scene, doesn't matter. But then you can delve into that during the Batman solo missions, and what I was thinking was because Justice League is supposed to follow this, have Jason die in Justice League. That way, when you hit Batman 1, you're getting a very distraught, broken man, because basically his son died in the line of duty. I think that would work out very well, and then in those movies you could delve into the relationship with him and Dick Grayson, because Dick would probably be Nightwing in those.
Okay, Derrick Zane, one last thought.
But again, this is a lot of history that you're going to delve into without any real context yet. I think it's honestly a bad idea to bring a Robin into the picture this early into the game. I mean, if we're dealing with Jason, then you got to deal with Joker. You got a whole fucking just grab bag of stuff you got to deal with that you just don't have the time to deal with in this movie.
Right, and that's good points on both sides of that. Again, my final thought on that is, I hate repeating myself, this is a Man of Steel sequel. Therefore, I don't see how that could really, become a major part or have some, effect on this movie as a whole. The next one is, I don't see any need for us to really get into. The next one is, evidently the Batcave is super cool looking and the Batmobile looks similar to Tim Burton's. The only thing I can ask either one of you...
Well, the reason this is here is because the source was supposedly fired from the art department.
Right.
So of course they've seen the beginning stages of the art. And honestly, artists are always going to throw their spin. And if you think that the Tim Burton Batmobile was awesome, then of course you're going to draw that.
Okay, let me
concept.
just ask this. We'll ask this question for that rumor. DHA, start with you. Would you rather see a more traditional looking Batmobile, or would you rather see him kind of carry on the tradition of the Tumbler that Christopher Nolan started?
No, I never liked the Tumbler because I didn't think it fit like the Bat motif. I mean, it made sense in the real world. This is what you would have. But I can't believe that nobody recognized what that was. I mean, you had a lot of Wayne Tech people working on that thing, designing that thing, constructing that thing, and nobody recognized it. I don't know. Right. At least with the Tim Burton Batmobile, supposedly Batman made that himself. Bruce Wayne designed it, built it himself, and that makes it believable. And it fits the Bat motif. I did like that Tim Burton Batmobile.
Derrick Zane, same question.
Well, let's not forget, in the world of Batman live action, there's been only 3 actual Batmobiles. There's been the Burton Batmobile, the Tumbler, and then, of course, the original Adam West,
Oh, you're skipping over Val Kilmer's. I see what happened.
We don't count those. Those movies never existed.
I did like that. I like that open cockpit on it.
Okay.
No nipples on the Batsuit.
Yeah.
But my point is, so we've only really had 3 real existing vehicles. Everything else has been on paper or in animated form. Now, almost every kind of vehicle that we've seen in the comics has resembled more along the lines of the Burton Batmobile. So that makes sense. It would also be a vehicle that he could build by himself out of various parts that didn't necessarily need to be custom made beyond his own abilities. So that works. It also thematically fits to be more like that because remember, the Batmobile is very striking. You know what the hell it is when you see it, but you don't know where you would find it because it's not something you can just go to the dealer and get.
Right.
So it works. The Tumbler was meant to be more something along the lines, like you said, a more realistic representation of what that kind of vehicle would be.
A modernized.
But even then, there are the problems of this is military tech that was made by a massive corporation. Somebody's going to fucking recognize it when it's on the evening news.
Right. So your theory, you agree that you're for a more traditional looking Batmobile along the lines of what Tim Burton created?
It makes the most sense. But like I said, there haven't been huge examples to kind of work with.
Right.
So it doesn't hurt to kind of go to a more traditional looking Batmobile.
Right. Okay. That's like I said. That's kind of one of those. It makes a lot of sense. Whatever. The next question. It kind of. I don't know. Let's just jump right into it. The next possible spoiler is that Lois is somehow investigating Lex Luthor. Big deal? Not a big deal? Derrick Zane, go ahead.
I think that's it's obvious. I think that's a great way to introduce Lex. Basically, the movie opens up, Lois is there, maybe doing an expose, maybe just doing an interview. That's her effing job. I mean, honestly, without this little plot point, Lois really doesn't have a lot to do in this movie.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's not a huge stretch. I mean, he is a massively important individual. He's the head of LexCorp. LexCorp, we've already established, exists in the universe in the first movie. Why wouldn't she be doing an expose on this incredibly powerful, business mogul?
Right. We're good with that. The next one I want to bring up, and this one is, okay, it needs some explaining. And Derrick, we're going to start off with you. The next one is Metallo kills Clark with the word "kills" in parentheses. Derek, what do you think of that?
To kill Clark this soon kind of puts a big sticking point in any future Man of Steel movies, because the whole point is the duality. Is that Clark, Kal-El tries to be Clark, or, who is the actual real person? Is Kal-El Clark, or is Clark Kal-El? That is the duality of Superman. Superman is a god amongst humans, but he's a god who lives right because he was raised by a good family in Kansas. That's the point that everybody misses when you're dealing with Superman. He is more than just the sum total of his powers. He's a guy who understands inherently right and wrong because he was raised right. So if you kill Clark that early, you remove his ability to continue to kind of be able to walk amongst mortal men.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because if we remember, what's one of the final lines Superman has in the Man of Steel, David, you talked earlier about when when they had the drones going after Superman, trying to find out where he's from, where he hangs out at, I guess. He tells him, General, I grew up in Kansas. It doesn't get more American than me. That kind of lends into what you're trying to explain right now.
Mm-hmm. And if you kill Clark that early in the story, you kind of lose that ability that he has to be able to kind of relate to the average man on the street. You need his ability to kind of not be God amongst men, to be able to kind of walk amongst us.
Right. DHA, what are your thoughts of...
Otherwise, he goes back to being super hobo.
Right. I hear you.
I think honestly, it really doesn't matter. If they phased Clark out, there was a time in the comics where Clark basically had to quote unquote die, just so he could be Superman more often and do his thing. I think that'd be an interesting way to go. I agree with Derek that I think that would be too soon, because that is the point of Superman, is being Clark and Superman at the same time.
Well, let me ask you both this real quick, because on that subject, okay? With Clark, you both are very familiar with the comics, much more familiar than I am with it. When you like you just brought up, there was a point in time when Clark was phased out. DHA, what happened to the character of Superman after that? Did the stories continue to flourish, or did that kind of bring like a beginning of an end?
No, I mean, I want to say that I think the comics continued, obviously, but they eventually realized that they needed Clark back, because Clark is really who we relate to. Clark Kent is the person that we can see, okay, that could be my friend Joe, and then secretly he's a superhero. So that, getting rid of that would be a bad idea. But this could be, honestly, as simple as, oh no, there's a big thing, and Metallo shoots Clark, and, he's got to pretend to be dead for a second. But, there's a lot of ways you can easily say, oh, well, he was brought back by Wonder Woman's lasso, or Batman had a secret weapon, or Superman saved me just at the last moment, that kind of thing.
Derrick Zane, your final thought.
Yeah, without any real, like you said, without any real context to what that line means, we don't really know. It's just all speculation.
Right.
Personally, it seems a little early in the story to kind of kill Clark. So, and it could be that Metallo knows that Clark is that Clark is Kal-El.
Right.
And we think that he kills him with kryptonite, but he does. I mean, like I said, we don't know. Until we actually know, we just don't know. We're just all speculation.
It takes on a lot of different speculation. There's so many avenues you can go down, and that's fine. Let's get into the next one, okay? And I don't know how big this one is. It's not nearly as big as the final one, which we're going to get to. But we basically got two more spoilers left. The first one is the Daily Planet is bought by Lex Luthor for PR purposes. Derek, any thoughts on that?
Well, that would make sense for why Lois would be doing an expose on him,
Definitely.
especially if he just suddenly became her boss.
That's what I'm thinking. That probably would make sense. DHA, your thoughts on that?
It perfectly fits in. Lex has done that in the comics. He did it in Lois and Clark. He's done it. Obviously as a businessman, he wants to control all avenues of the media. He's got his own Lex channel. He's got his own magazines. Absolutely. Why wouldn't he have a newspaper? And kind of going off of what Derek said, maybe the problem is that Lois writes a story, Lex gets a copy of it before it's printed, and it's a hard-hitting, oh my god, this is going to blow Watergate out of the water. So Lex decides, oh well, it's not going to get printed because I'm going to buy that bitch.
Okay. Finally, one last rumor. I'm not sure if this is the biggest rumor out of all of them that we've discussed, but it is the last one, and it is pretty heavy. At the end, Superman is living in exile, and the Justice League is a government-approved superhero team. Derrick Zane, your thoughts on that?
Again, it just seems very, very silly. Why would you screw up the Superman story that badly to have the government try to fight Superman when it's so much easier just to include him into what you're doing and make him one of yours? Make him one of the guys. Now, maybe the suit of the Justice League could get started as a means to kind of checks and balance Superman, but ultimately, if you really get down to it, who can stop him?
Really, nobody.
Really?
Well, I mean, outside...
Really. The only thing that stops him is...
Kryptonite.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, all the stupid fanboy arguments aside and all that nonsense and removed, the only thing that stops Superman is Superman.
Okay. Right. DHA, your thoughts?
Back in the 80s, the Justice League did become a government force. It was the first run of Justice League International. Basically, Superman had left the team, Wonder Woman left the team. Batman wasn't an official member, but he did help out from time to time. But basically, they brought in a guy named Maxwell Lord, and he saw a potential to create this UN-type group, which could be exactly where they're going. But anyway, he brought in guys like the Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, the Martian Manhunter, Captain Marvel, and that's kind of where the Justice League International came from. But yes, Superman was not a part of that team. Batman was not. Wonder Woman was not. So it could fit, and it could be a very interesting dynamic if they choose to go that route. And if the one above, where Metallo kills Clark is true, then I can kind of see why Superman isn't just hiding out as Clark Kent.
But one thing that all the comics seem to have in common when dealing with Superman is that he has the support of the people. So for me to read that at the end of the possibility of him ending the Man of Steel second movie is him living in exile. That to me says at some point he's going to lose the faith of the people. Derek, your thoughts?
The way that would work, and if we tie it into Luthor operating in the shadows, is that it's a frame up by Luthor to kind of get rid of this guy.
Right.
And that might explain Metallo. Now remember, Metallo's big anger towards Superman is that Superman injured him so badly at one point that he had to require the kryptonite to keep him going.
Right.
So again, it's all speculation, but that would make sense story-wise to have his reputation be ruined so badly by this master manipulator, of Lex Luthor.
Excellent. Okay, those are all the supposed spoilers. Okay, so I want to end this by basically saying that regardless of what happens, this is going to be a phenomenal movie, I think. At least when it comes out, we see it in the theaters, we're going to love it. Depending on whether we love it, 10 years from now is a whole other story because, again, when the Tim Burton Batman movies came out, I loved them. But then I saw the Christopher Nolan Batman movies and it made me realize just how much I really don't like the Tim Burton Batman movies. I want to hear what you guys want to see the most. You know, in a nutshell, without going heavily into it, because I want to kind of keep this under an hour. What do you guys want to see the most from this Man of Steel movie, possibly leading into the Justice League, and who would you like to see other movies from? Derek, let's start with you.
What would I like to see in an actual Justice League movie?
Well, no. What would you rather see? What would you like to see from this Man of Steel sequel, and what would you like to see sprout from that? Be it other sequels from other characters, the Justice League.
Well,
if you were doing the writing,
perfect world. This is the story that would be told on my perspective.
Okay.
Clark, as we know, Kal-El has become Clark, the kind of public persona of a reporter for the Daily Planet.
Correct.
Gets a job to kind of go. Starts out, we see that Lois has gotten the big juicy job of doing the report on Lex Luthor, whereas Clark, being the kind of schlep rock that he is, all right, Clark, we need you to go over to Gotham. Why do I got to go to Gotham? That place is dangerous. Well, just go do this interest, this period interest piece on this kind of urban myth of the Batman. So he goes and he starts kind of digging into the Batman and finds out, oh shit, this guy's real, and he's kind of considered dangerous. Well, I'm kind of a do-gooder. Maybe I'll go stop him because he's obviously a dangerous vigilante.
Right.
And that could create the initial tension between him and Clark, and him and Bruce. Then they find out they both are working to the same purposes, and they have to work together to stop this danger of Metallo, who is being manipulated by Luthor. Now, on the behind the scenes, Luthor is kind of doing his dance around Lois, and the two of them are kind of feeling each other out. She's trying to dig into the truth of it. He's doing everything he can to kind of keep her from it. Buys the planet to kind of throw her off the trail, that sort of thing. Uses the power of the planet and other media forms to kind of paint Superman as a dangerous person because, look, he's working with this dangerous vigilante in Gotham, and sets things up to kind of ruin his reputation in the eyes of the people.
Now, what you're kind of describing,
which maybe causes the formation of the Justice League.
What you're kind of describing, and I may be wrong about this, but it kind of seems a lot similar to how you were describing the New 52 series. Would you like to see that?
Which would make sense. Well, it would make sense for them to use that.
Right.
As a template. I mean, that's kind of what Marvel did with their series, is they're using the Ultimates as their template. It wasn't exactly one-to-one, but it was a good enough example to do because the Ultimates was written to be more of an adult-styled story.
Right.
It would make sense for DC and Warner Brothers to kind of go along that route, to use the New 52 as a template.
DavidHawk actor, what would you like to see in the Man of Steel series or sequel, and what would you like to see that be the beginning of, if anything?
Well, I think everything that Derek said is actually a very good idea. It would be very good idea for them to watch or just read the New 52 and kind of see where they should go. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the end of Man of Steel 2. What I want to see at the end of Man of Steel 2 is Superman obviously stops Lex Luthor. We know this. So Lex Luthor decides, you know what? I'm not going to make another monster like Metallo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe seek other help, and all of a sudden he gets a signal from Brainiac. That leads right into a Justice League movie. That's what I'd like to see. I think Brainiac would be the perfect villain to bring, brand new heroes together, or heroes out of retirement, whatever you want.
Could you honestly see Brainiac, his involvement happening like after the credits? After the credits roll, you see a defeated Lex Luthor maybe, and then he gets the message from Brainiac right there.
Absolutely, and I think if they wanted to follow that Marvel format of doing a little stinger at the end, I think that'd be a good idea.
Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, and for a Justice League movie, you would need somebody on the level of a Brainiac to really hammer home that point of this is the stakes. It's huge. I mean, the only
One
thing other
thing-
than that would be some kind of massive planetary invasion, but they've already done that sort of stuff.
Right.
So go with
Yeah, the only
Brainiac.
other thing I was going to say, in the very first Justice League comic book, the one that brought them all together at the very beginning, it was actually Starro. For those people watching this that maybe don't know who Starro is, he's an alien entity that looks like a big starfish. And what he does is he shoots out these little starfish that stick onto your face, and all of a sudden you're being mind controlled. And he basically feeds off the energy of the people that are, being sucked up. But anyway, that would have been very interesting. But I think Brainiac's a much better way to go.
Okay, I'm going to end this by saying that I love...
Because Starro's kind of dumb.
Right. I love all these ideas. I think I kind of agree. I like where DZ was going with it. I like how DavidHawk actor wants to bring in Brainiac at the end, but I also like my idea of doing it after the credits. After the credits roll, you see Brainiac somehow get in contact with a defeated Lex Luthor. Before I let everyone go, before I let us all go, I just want to do one last thing. Recommended comics for people to read, just one or two comics to get everybody in the mood for what's upcoming with these. Who do you recommend? DHA, what comics would you recommend people read in getting prepared for these, the sequel coming up?
Well, since we can basically guess where Derek's going to say to start out, I'm actually going to go old school. I'm going to say read the Justice League International first run series. I think that's a great way to learn how the government reacts with the Justice League, and how that can work, as well as it'll introduce you to a bunch of characters that maybe the Justice League will use. Like you said, Zack Snyder likes to go off the cuff. Maybe he's going to use Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman like he has to, but then he's going to give us some people out of left field like Fire and Ice. I think that would be a great choice, but I think that would be a good starting point for some people.
Derrick Zane, what comics would you recommend for people to get a little bit educated before?
Well, for people to really get the kind of flavor in their mouth of where this is going to be, obviously you're going to want Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. If you want just stories of the individual characters, everybody has been so fixated on the Batman for so damn long. Instead, start reading some stuff on Superman's. Look for Man of Tomorrow. What Price Tomorrow is actually a very good one. Look into some Wonder Woman. The Wonder Woman stories are really good.
Any specific Wonder
Aquaman.
Woman? Any specific Wonder Woman that you recommend?
I can't think off the top of my head the name of the titles, because unfortunately we have that tendency to kind of fixate solely on the Batman because he's Batman.
The reason I ask this is because
there are some good ones out there.
There's tons of different universes, and we need to kind of figure out, by judging basically on how both Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan have gone with their universes, I guess which comics best reflect these universes. And even though they're not going to be perfect, which one would get you ready for it? But also, Derek, it goes without saying, the New 52, I'm sure you recommend hardcore?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, just because it's good reading.
Right.
It's kind of fun to see a rebirth of that story.
Absolutely. And on that note... go ahead, Dave. You have the last word.
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that there's really not a comic book series that's going to give you that same Christopher Nolan feel, because it just doesn't work like that. But one thing I might recommend then would be Superman Birthright. It was a great origin tale that kind of fits along with what they did in the movie. Excellent.
Derek, I want to thank you for being our first guest speaker today. I'm going to ask you is maybe one of the next couple of shows you sit in again, because I would like to discuss maybe the Dark Knight Returns and possibly correlating that with the upcoming series, if you're good with that.
Sure.
Excellent. I'm Sam Luciano. This is DavidHawk actor, and hopefully this turns out good, and we'll see you next time.